get started then. My name is Amnon Kruvi, and welcome to the session about invocable methods. So, we'll start by talking about what invocable methods actually are. And to get into that, we're going it doesn't seem to be. Here's a song from my heart. I think it's a perfect start for my show about invocable methods. Don't be scared, it's no joke. No, I'm not having a stroke. Let's begin with a useful presentation. See, here's my apex. It's a trigger updating contacts, and it's all in code. But let's get down the road. Heal the old, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire user base. There are all these admins who cannot reuse what you're writing. Make a better org for you and for me. If they want to use a way to add a record type, let's say, but they need your functionality to skip it. No, they can't without code. Change the operating mode. Call the devs and wait a month until they finish. But if you happen to have used the flow for your function, they can change the step and add another check. Heal the old, make it a better place for you and for me and the entire user base. There are all these admins who cannot reuse what you're writing. Make a better org for you and for me. You can call your method in the process on a record change. Make a quick form in the flow and add it to the record page. And if you want your classes to run at a certain time, you can easily add to your processes scheduled actions. If you want to erase that trigger from your code base, this is how you can automate your system. Then at the top, an invocable method. Don't forget to add a label and description. What we've done here is allow the code to be running just a normal flow and process builder run. Make it a better place for you and for me and the entire user base. There are all these admins who cannot reuse what you're writing. Make a better org for you and for me. Right. Thank you. And welcome to this very musical session about invocable methods. And just like any good musical, we're going to start off by introducing our characters. Yes, we have characters. On this side, we have the system administrator. I don't know, how many people are admins here in the room? Very good, very good. That's you. And on the other side, we have our developers. How many developers do we have in the room? Excellent. Now, a bit about both characters. The sysadmin is quite often the person who comes up with the requirements that developers have to create. The admin is very good with declarative tools, process builder, flow, workflows, But they don't really like the developers because they think we spend all day on Reddit. Let's face it, you know it's true. On the other hand, we have our software developers. Now we can do a lot more complex things with Apex code as opposed to the declarative tools that I mentioned earlier. But to write something in code is a slower process that costs more. Of course, it doesn't really help that we spend all day on Reddit. Maybe if we did a bit less of that, we could do things a bit faster. But hey, and thus started the 1,024-year war. All the developers should appreciate that. Now, obviously, I'm not here to talk about coding bad, declarative good. That's not what I'm here to do. Coding's great. I love to code. We can do things with code that we can't do declaratively, such as tackle complex requirements. Any admin here who's ever tried doing anything with business hours, for example, using declarative tools, I don't want to be in your shoes. We have much finer control over performance, so we don't have to worry about overheads. We know exactly what's happening. And for us developers, it's just a lot easier to write a few lines of code than to go into Process Builder, create a new process, drag a few steps around, and do all the stuff with the mouse. We don't really like that. So coding's great, but it comes at some costs. How many people here work in sprints? Anyone working with Agile? Right? So you know the minimum, bare minimum amount of time it's going to take you to deploy a piece of code from being asked it is 2 weeks. Right? You go through the sprint, then maybe if everything's good, it gets deployed to a UAT and production, depending on how long the sprint is. It can be quite a while longer than 2 weeks. And let's say we did something wrong, so I made a tiny mistake, tiny typo, then we have to start the whole thing all over again. Another sprint, another QA test, another cycle, all the way from the beginning. But the end result is that when we write something with code, the admins working on the same org, this is sleeping, I'm sorry. My head is a bit too large for this, I think. Yeah. The admins, at the end of the day, don't really know what's happening in their own orgs. And that creates friction and phone calls on a Friday night asking you, oh my God, something's broken. What do I do? Come on. Every developer here worked a Friday night or 20 million. So our developer decided to find the path to peace between admins and devs. She went to the furthest reaches of the world and climbed the highest mountain. Now, this is a musical, come on, I need some drama here. Where she found the code Jedi. We all know one. Jedi, please teach me your wisdom. How can I put an end to this miserable war? And I'm going to do this in my best Yoda impression, so please forgive me if I'm bad. Compromise, you should. But honestly, what's compromise? How can people who use declarative tools like Process Builder and people who write code, what is the compromise in between? It's not like we can have some sort of fairyland where we still write code, but the admins can decide when and where and how it's executed. That's just nonsense, right? Oh, okay. That's exactly what we're going to do with Invocable Methods. Sorry, I forgot to review my own slides. And the end result of that is going to be that when we can still write complicated things with code, but admins know exactly what's happening because they can see what the code does in one of the tools that they control, and they can make changes to it. Which means, if something goes a tiny bit wrong, or they need to make a tiny change into something, they don't necessarily have to call the developer. And that means less maintenance on code that you already wrote. Now, show of hands, how many developers here like to maintain code every time a request comes in? Not everyone at once, please. Good. That's the idea. If the admins have the capability of both seeing and understanding, as well as making changes to the orchestration of our code, we're going to get a larger resource pool to work with, because admins can do some of that work. They keep asking us to. We're going to have a quicker deployment cycle because they don't need to worry about overheads. QA cycles, unit testing, sprints. An admin can just come into an org and do whatever they want. But can, should, you know. And of course, we can still handle all those complicated scenarios that we thought we just needed plain code to create. So here's how we create an invocable method. An invocable method is just a regular class. It's a piece of code. It has to be static, and it has to be public, or if you're writing a managed package, you need it global if you want users to use it. And the only thing that makes it special is this annotation called invocable method. I know, shocking. We give the method a label and a description. These are presented to the administrator when they create a flow. So when they create a flow, they search for your method according to the label that you set, as opposed to the actual method name, which can be camel-cased and not as readable as a plain text label. And an invocable method can receive parameters. Now, to the admins in the room, you've probably done, probably made a few flows where you could pass values to an action. Or in Process Builder, when you create a record, you can pass values to each individual field. For developers to create something like that, we need to accept a list of values as a parameter. You can only accept one list of values. But that list of values can be a custom class with multiple fields, which would allow the admin to set multiple values that are sent to your flow. Now, the reason we have to do it as a list is because invocable methods are bulkified. So if we have 100 processes running, you're going to have your code called just once with a list of 100 input parameters. And as a result, your code needs to return that same list of results where the indexes match. So if I have 100 inputs, I need to provide 100 outputs with the same, with the matching index. Just like with the inputs, we can return a class with invocable variables that the admins can then use to get outputs in their flows. So I can make a class that performs some sort of calculation. The admin can use that class and put the result of that calculation in a variable that they can use completely declaratively without having to see inside the code. Now, I know this was a lot, but if some of you are still not convinced, I'm hoping the following will do a bit to help. This is a musical, I promised. The code I write on my laptop tonight, full of triggers and settings. A program in isolation can only change it from within. The client said that this will never change again. But you know that's false. It's time to use your brain. Don't let them win. Don't let them say that our coding is the only way. Expose methods so they will know to use a flow. Let it flow, let it flow. There's no excuse anymore. Let it flow, let it flow. Let your admins use your code. If you say this may change one day, make your admin strong. Change has never bothered them anyway. How some people want code to do it all, but they get upset when others complain about control. It's time to see what they can do when we give them the proper tools. Let's change requests for silly things, which means let it flow. Let it flow, be one with declarative tools. Let it flow, let it flow. You make your admins through. If you say this may change one day, make your admins strong. I'm done. Your function needs to work with just a single list. But you can use instead a custom class with many fields. It's orcified so you can execute it fast. If you can manage, put triggers in the past. Let it flow, become an admin champion. Let it flow, and declare their problems gone. If you say this may change one day, make your admin strong. Jesus never bothered them anyway. The fun part is over now. And we're going to talk about the negative, the drawbacks of invocable methods. It's not all sunshine and butterflies, as I'd like to have everyone believe. Let's talk performance. So performance is actually quite good for invocable methods. My testing late last year showed that if you run up to 200 instances of a process or a flow in one go, everything's fine. The difference is negligible with a couple of milliseconds, a bit slower, but absolutely negligible. But the moment you get to the 201st record,
no, save me.
no. So one thing to keep in mind, make sure you use invocable methods for smaller operations. Not that 200 is tiny, but nothing that's more than that. Now, we also have the issue of when can we actually execute an invocable method. So we can use it in Process Builder, we can use it in Flow, which means either manually or after a record creation or change. Whereas with Apex triggers, we've got so much more context that we can choose from. We can do after and before delete, after and before undelete, before insert, before update, and we don't have those contexts with invocable methods and declarative tools. But I would dare say that the majority of triggers, a lot of, a good portion of triggers is written in one of those two contexts that are supported by Process Builder. Who wants to see a demo? Yay! Now, let's see if I can drag this over here. Cool, no, I'm not actually seeing what I'm doing, so I'm going to turn this over. We have a flow. Anyone seen the new flow builder? You don't look like you have.
I've never seen it.
It's brand new for you. And in this flow, we have 3 steps. The first one is, well, this flow gets an input variable with a contact ID. And the first thing that the flow does is fetch a couple of fields from the contact. Their address, their city and state. That's just a normal get record step. It uses the record ID to fetch the city and state fields from the contact. And here, we call an invocable method using an Apex action. And you can see that this invocable method receives 3 different parameters, if I can see them. So we have the date, we have the city, and we have the country. And the reason we can send all 3 parameters is because our code itself receives a class with 3 different class members. We're going to see that in a second as well. And we also have 3 output variables. We have the time zone delta, the local time, and the name of the time zone. And I'm hoping you guys can see where this is leading, because after this, we have a screen that just shows, outputs the results of the invocable method in a screen. Time zone calculation with 3 steps in a flow because of one very short invocable method, and we're going to see what it looks like. This is a contact record in Lightning, and this card here, that's a flow component. So some of you might know you can add flows, screen flows directly into a Lightning record page. That Lightning record page can send the record ID into a variable. We use that record ID to get the city and country, and we display the person's time zone the current time and the GMT delta. What is it good for? If you're at a call center and you're gonna, some people here, I'm assuming that the information is gonna come to the States. They're gonna try and phone us at the end of this event, right? You'd rather that they call you at a decent time during the day rather than 4 o'clock in the morning. So it seems to me like a good idea to maybe show their local time on a contact page. And let's take a look at how this method actually works. If I can get the mouse running. And drag this here. This is the whole code to do that, and most of it actually doesn't do anything. It just defines the inputs and outputs. So we have our invocable method annotation right here at the top. Notice that there is a label and there is a description because we always write a description, right? Yes, you know. Under that we have the name of our method, and it receives a list of parameters, list of locations. A location is a class that's defined here. It has no logic in it, it just has a few members. Each of them has the invocable variable annotation, defining whether or not it's required, and a label for the field. We have a date, we have a country, we have a city. Same with the outputs. So we have time zone delta, the time zone name, and the local time. And this is the part that actually does the logic. There's not much in there. It just gets the time, puts it through the standard Salesforce time zone conversion classes, and that's it. I guess this wraps up this presentation. Are there any questions?
Is there another communist on in the presentation?
To get the other one,
Should be the call.
to get the other one, you're going to need to sign up to the London Developer Group and keep watch. There are a couple more that I've done about CSS variables if you want.
So talking about admins, they do what they can, should, how do you control whether somebody imports over 200 records at a time? So would you say there's a technical workaround so I can detect in my flow, okay, it's too big, rather not touch it? Or would you say, yeah, bad luck? So if somebody imports 250 records of 5,000 because it's needed, they should first deactivate the flow. What's your suggestion?
So to anyone who couldn't hear, the question was, we mentioned that there's a performance issue with more than 200 records with invocable methods. How do we communicate to the admins, or how do we make sure that admins don't accidentally write flows and processes that break this limit? At the end of the day, it's about communication. You write something for a customer, the admins need to be educated about how to use invocable methods just as much as the developers. You could do something in the method itself, because the method gets the list of all the records. You could create some sort of automatic email sending if the list length is more than 200, some sort of email warning to the admin.
You could do it in the flow. You could get your records, dump it into a collection, and then do a record count against that.
I think of, okay, I've had 250 records in my list, I know that, okay, let's send out a platform event and get another execution context.
I don't think that would work with flows, because I don't think flows have any capability of executing or splitting a flow into two separate contexts. I could be wrong, I can't say that.
You could actually sort the records into collections that are about 200 large, and then pass the thing into an invocable method that fires a privacy right over that. So actually you can do the pattern again and recurse into even deeper. It might be a bit freaky.
I'll tell you what, if you can write an invocable method that triggers a flow asynchronously, they can use that.
Yeah.
Split it into lists of 200, call the flow again asynchronously with X input parameters.
Give me some time to reverse, and then I will sing that to you.
I don't think let it split into 200 record batches is very catchy. Anyone else? No? Okay. Oh, in the back.
Where do the exceptions go?
Exceptions. So flow exceptions generally go by email to the sysadmin. I think it's not any different with invocable methods. I'd imagine the sysadmin would get an email with the actual error message that's happening.
Because code never throws exceptions.
You can configure the email address that receives an error message as well, but you can also configure the flow so it handles errors a little more elegantly. You can literally say, if this works perfectly, just do this, but if this particular method fails or errors, then go in this direction. And instead of emailing, you could trigger another action, or you could have it display a message, so someone's not just seeing an error message, they're actually seeing something useful.
It depends on the type of error that's happening exactly. So if it's, for example, a government limit breach, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't catch it in code. But if it's something different, if it's a logical or code error, then you can catch most types of exceptions and handle them however you want, by email or log or whatever else.
That's probably the most useful advice, because every connection in flow has just another one, and that's the fourth path. And this is exactly what this was running about.
I think you can have error handlers in a flow as well. So that's also nice.
You can build a specific flow for your error handling, and then you send every flow to that. So it'll then send you an email, so you don't have to rebuild the error handling every time.
See, some people know a lot more than me already. Basically, to those who couldn't hear, she suggested creating an error handling flow and then linking to that as an error handler in the flow wherever you need to.
But what you said is still true. If you hit the platform limits, it's actually not executing the error handling flow.
And especially if you break more than 200 records, that's going to eat up a lot of your CPU time. So use with caution, just like everything else. Be moderate. Don't try and make flows that process 1 million records, because it's not going to work anyway whether you use invocables or not. Right. In that case.
The question is executed the invocable method executed in user context or global context?
So Apex is always executed in system context. You have access to everything. But always important to check things like, is creatable, is accessible, to see the actual running user and what access they have. If you don't check for permissions explicitly, you can access anything in Apex. Okay.
I just want to say this was fantastic, and thank you for singing.
Thank you. I'm going to put Keanu Reeves and say, you're fantastic.
I have to change my presentation because of this one.
I'll tell you what, we can write something together.
Yeah.
Okay, well guys, thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you had a fun time and learned something about invocable methods.
You're breathtaking.
You're breathtaking. Thank you.